Get back behind the rope. Old man, you're not cleared to stand there. The voice came sharp, carrying the edge of routine authority. Lieutenant Sarah Reed, 34, held her tablet tight against her side, uniform straight, boots shining, eyes scanning for anything out of place. She had spent weeks rehearsing protocol for this ceremony. No one had said anything about an elderly civilian in the restricted zone. "Did you hear me?" "Sir," she said. Louder now. "Step back, please." The old man didn't move. Arthur Penrose was 83. His hands were folded in front of him, veins like faded maps. He stared at the flagpole, still bare, still waiting to rise. No sign of confusion, only quiet intent. Reed tried again. "This is a formal event. Security's strict today." Arthur's answer was calm, clipped, controlled. "I planted one of those once." The words caught her off guard. "You planted what exactly?" "The flag," he said. Then silence, heavy enough to make people turn. A young steward stepped closer. "Come on, sir. We need to keep this area clear." Arthur's gaze didn't shift. "I'll not be in your way." A child's voice floated from the crowd. "Mum, he smells like smoke." Someone laughed, someone else frowned. Reed sighed through her nose. "All right, that's enough. Let's move him." 2 guards approached. One held a hand out. "Easy does it." "Sir." Arthur nodded once, as if granting permission. "Do what you must." As they reached for his arm, something slid from his sleeve. It fell to the stone with a dull, wooden tap, a blackened fragment, no bigger than a finger. "What's that?" said one guard. Arthur crouched, slow but steady, and picked it up. "Bit of an old staff," he said. "Caught fire once, long ago." Reed looked down, confused. "You've kept that." He turned the splinter in his palm. It reminded me where it stood. The crowd leaned closer, caught between curiosity and doubt. A veteran near the back whispered, "That wood looks old, very old." Another shook his head. "Best ignore it. Ceremony's starting." Reed hesitated, uncertain whether to press or retreat. Arthur slipped the piece into his coat pocket and straightened. "Raise it high," he said quietly. "Higher than before." Reed blinked. "Excuse me." Arthur gave a faint nod toward the pole. "It matters how it faces the wind." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, not sure why she cared. A bell sounded in the square. People turned toward the dais. Arthur stayed where he was. The guards didn't touch him again. Reed watched his stillness and felt something shift she couldn't name. For the first time that morning, the ceremony wasn't the center of attention. An old man had said one line, and the crowd could no longer look away. 2 stewards closed in with the practiced softness of men who move trouble. Mark, the taller, kept his hand low and steady. "Come on, sir," he said. "Let's step aside for the service." Arthur eased his arm out so they could guide him. No sudden motion, nothing dramatic, only the slow economy of a man used to obeying and giving orders. "I said I planted one once," he repeated, as if testing the phrase for weight. Mark glanced to Lieutenant Sarah Reed, waiting for the go-ahead. Reed checked her tablet, eyes flicking over names and lists. "Orders are clear," she said. "We cannot have civilians in the working area." Arthur did not argue. He folded his hands as if folding a map, and then something moved under his sleeve. A thin, blackened splinter dropped to the paving with a dry, dull sound. Silence fell like a held breath. The splinter was no larger than a thumb, charred at one end, raw grain visible at the other. Someone muttered "Flagstaff." Mark picked it up with 2 fingers, turning it as if assessing its age. It left a dark dust on his glove. Arthur watched, expression fixed, like a man reading the end of a sentence he had begun decades ago. Reed stepped closer, voice softer now. "Where did you get that?" "Sir?" she asked. "From a line that should not be forgotten," he said, and his words were small and precise. A veteran in the crowd, medals dull as old coins, whispered, "My God." He knew the wood, or at least its smell in memory. and his face went paper pale. Someone near him reached for a pocket and turned a phone to capture the fragment. Questions threaded through the crowd, quick as sparrows. Is he telling the truth? Someone asked, is he making it up? Another replied. Arthur pressed his thumb along the scar on his knuckle. The motion like checking a fit, he said. I had to hold it up with my hands until the sergeant shouted and the line could take cover. His voice did not waver. Mark said we should escort him out. Reed hesitated. The ceremony about to begin, and protocol on one side and the fragment on the other. She looked at the photograph on her tablet, then at Arthur, as if trying to match one to the other. Arthur lowered his voice, almost to himself. They called the hill 72, he said, but names blur. The fragment warmed slightly in his palm, or perhaps it was only the heat of memory. The crowd edged nearer, the child who had spoken before, now silent and watching. A murmur rose, then checked itself as an older officer appeared from the dais, pausing to take in the scene. He did not yet speak, but his face asked a question the crowd could not answer. Mark kept hold of Arthur's elbow, not harsh, only guiding. Arthur allowed it, but his eyes stayed on the flagpole. He said nothing more, and the officers hesitated between duty and an old, stubborn truth. Eileen Holloway, 65, sat forward and touched her locket as if it might steady a memory. Her voice came out thin, surprising against the square. My father was at Hill 72, she said. The words cut the murmur. Lieutenant Sarah Reed glanced up, interest flickering across a trained face. Eileen held the gaze like a lens holding light, and then she spoke a detail so small it might have been made up. He always said the pole burned, and someone kept it upright with his hands. He called him quiet, never named him. Reed's jaw tightened. She remembered evenings at home when her father hummed a march with a falter, never telling the rest. A soldier beside Reed looked at his tablet, fingers hesitating. Do you know the company, Mrs. Holloway? He asked. Eileen nodded. 14th. We had a son in that company. A younger man near the back rocked on his heels, hands trembling around his cup. Arthur watched the exchange without shifting, thumb tracing the scar on his knuckle like a man following a seam. The steward Mark frowned, glancing between the checklist on his clipboard and the crowd. Records say a Penrith, not Penrose, he murmured to Reed, the syllables dropping like stones into a pond. Reed turned the tablet so the words were visible to her, and then to Arthur, as if watching for a mimic to fall from his face. Arthur's stare found no one and everyone at once. He said, Names change in the dark. Men change names to get back on their feet. Reed's face went slack for a heartbeat. Anger and something else tangled under the skin. A man in the crowd, ribbons dulled to flat brass, stood up slowly. Sergeant Haynes, he said, voice small, as if speaking of a ghost. He pointed to Arthur without meaning to make a spectacle. He kept my mate alive. I thought he was gone. The square leaned in. A camera phone lifted, trembling hands holding a frame of possible truth. Questions multiplied, short and sharp, like snapped threads. Is this the man? Someone asked. Did he save them? Another said. Reed swallowed, thinking of the neat stack of papers on her desk, of the list where her father's name sat beside a different surname. She remembered the gentleness in his voice when he refused to speak of some mornings. She felt a tug at the place under her breastbone where duty sat, and it was not purely protocol. Arthur's voice came low and steady. I did what we had to. He did not boast. He did not look for thanks. The words were workmanlike, like someone accounting for a day's labor. Eileen's hand found the hem of her coat and gripped it, knuckles white. An older officer moved toward the dais, then paused, studying the crowd with a face that had stored many orders. He did not yet speak, but his presence tightened the air as a drum tightens a skin. Someone near the front whispered that the general was expected, and the whisper grew teeth. Reed stared at Arthur, at the fragment tucked now back in his pocket, and felt the certainty of procedure wobble. She had a choice. She had not been trained to make follow the rules she had sworn to enforce, or follow a memory that might redeem a life. The bell for the ceremony began to toll in the distance, and the square waited, poised between an order and a truth that would not be simple. General Marcus Hale stepped down from the dais with the slow surety of rank. He paused when he saw the fragment and the way the crowd had gathered. He did not look surprised, only intent, as if meeting a page from his past. Oliver Carter, a young reporter with a worn camera, moved forward. He held up a faded photograph for all to see. Smoke blurred the edges. A bent staff rose from mud, and a younger man drove a pole with blackened hands. Hale studied the image, then Arthur, the two faces folding into the same story. He asked, "Were you on Hill 72? Arthur answered, "Yes." A hush sank across the square, heavy and sudden. Reed's fingers tightened on her tablet, paperwork and protocol snagging in her throat. She watched Hale's face for an order she had not been given. Oliver padded closer, voice careful. "That picture matches," he said. The crowd shifted. Questions pushed at one another, short and urgent. "Is that him? Did he save them?" Hale drew nearer, not to arrest, but to measure the man before him. He asked where Arthur went after the action, a question that held more than movement. Arthur said, "I stayed to help. I held the pole until the line moved." Hale's jaw worked, and his eyes sharpened. He took the photograph and turned it over slowly. He called for the officer at the table to fetch the company list, his voice even but carrying weight. A sergeant descended from the dais and spoke low to Hale about names that did not match records. Reed stared at the tablet, pages of names blurring into doubt. She remembered nights at home when her father's lips closed on a memory he would not share. Duty tugged one way, recognition another. Oliver lowered his camera and slid the photograph toward Hale. Hale accepted it with 2 fingers, holding the paper as if it were a small authority. He did not speak, only considered the alignment of photo, man, and splinter in Arthur's pocket. Someone in the crowd whispered that the wood looked like teak used decades earlier. A veteran rose, hand shaking, and called out a name the square had not heard aloud. He said, "Haynes," he said. "He kept my mate alive." The words pushed through the hush and found lodgment. Faces changed, some with disbelief, some with gratitude. Reed felt the rules wobble beneath her feet, like loose bricks on a path. Hale's next move would bind the present to a record and possibly return a name to a ledger. He looked at Arthur and the fragment, and then to the tablet, where entries were neat and final. "Bring me the archives," he said, "and bring the company list." The instruction landed like an order and a plea. Arthur straightened, not proud but steadied, as if a weight had shifted to be held at last. Someone muttered about missing paperwork and forgotten names. The square leaned forward, waiting for pages to open. The question left hanging was why his name had slipped from the book. The papers came down from the dais, edges trembling in younger hands. General Marcus Hale read them once, twice, then looked straight at Arthur Penrose. The square held still, a collective breath on pause. Hale spoke, the sound low but carrying. "Arthur Penrose, formerly recorded as a Penrith, 14th Company, Hill 72. He raised the flag under fire and held the line until reinforcement arrived. No one moved. The words had the rhythm of a citation, yet were spoken like an apology. Reed lowered her tablet. The rules had found their ending. Arthur inclined his head. "Not in pride, but acceptance," he said. The names didn't matter, only the hands that held it. Hale nodded once, a motion of respect rather than command. Oliver Carter's camera clicked once, capturing what the crowd had already felt. The veterans in the back straightened, eyes glistening behind thick lenses. The child who had spoken before stepped out, poppy in hand. She approached slowly, looking to her mother, then to Arthur. "Can I?" she asked. Arthur smiled, small and tired. "Yes." he said. She placed the poppy near his shoe. Red against the stone, the general turned to the soldiers along the line. Attention, he said. Present arms. The square came alive with the sharp sound of motion. Metal caught light, a sudden flash of respect, brief and blinding. Arthur stood inside that sound, shoulders straight, eyes fixed on the flagpole. Hale faced the crowd. This man once planted a flag where no one thought it could stand, he said. Because of that. Others walked home. The applause began slow, then rolled like distant surf. It wasn't loud, but it was deep, drawn from the chest more than the throat. Arthur closed his eyes as if listening to something further away. When the noise eased, he opened his small case. Inside lay one medal and the charred fragment of wood. He took the splinter and knelt, lowering it to the base of the new pole. The wood met metal with a faint hum, almost musical. The flag above stirred, a movement light as breath. For a heartbeat. It seemed to bow, not from wind but recognition. Arthur's hand stayed there, steady. Then he rose, leaving the fragment pressed against the steel. The applause did not start again. The silence had become the honor itself. Hale saluted him. Short and exact, Arthur returned the gesture, palm precise despite its tremor. The two men held the salute a moment longer than protocol required. The crowd began to move, but no one spoke. Reed glanced once at the record list, then shut the tablet without saving. She looked at Arthur, as if understanding what duty really meant. Arthur stepped back from the pole. Metal case closed once more. He walked slowly through the gap that opened in the line of soldiers. The flag lifted higher, bright and full, as if it remembered the hands that had steadied it first. Some stories end with victory. This one ends with a man standing still, and a flag remembering the hands that raised it. Arthur Penrose never asked for a record, or a speech, or even a nameplate. He asked only that the line be held, once more. If you're still here, it means the quiet ones still matter to you. The ones who never made headlines, yet kept something upright when everything else was falling. Remember them. Speak softly, but remember. Quiet heroes will return with another name, another story, and another silence worth listening to.